But we don't have control over that. But as long as we live right as an individual, we trust that God's got this, He's hearing my prayers, and now He wants me to lay down and get a good night's rest so I can get up tomorrow, start anew, and do it again. We don't want our children, we want our children and grandchildren to have peace in their lives, and our Father in heaven is the same way. He wants us to have some peace. So when it's time to work during the day, it's time to work. But when it's time to rest, He wants you to lay down to rest. Verses 7 through 11. And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in the prison, and he smote Peter on the side, and raised him up, saying, Arise up quickly. And his chains fell off from his hands. And the angel said unto him, Gird thyself, and bind on thy sandals. And so he did. And he saith unto him, Cast thy garment about thee, and follow me. And he went out and followed him, and knew not that it was true which was done by the angel, but thought he saw a vision. When they were past the first and second ward, they came unto the iron gate that leadeth unto the city, which opened which opened to them of his own accord. And they went out and passed on through one street, and forthwith the angel departed from him. And when Peter was come to himself, he said, Now I know of surety that the Lord hath sent his angel, and hath delivered me out of the hand of Herod, and from all the expectation of the people of the Jews. God sends help when it looks like there's no way out. God got you a way out. If you're His child, He's got you a way out. A light shines in the prison cell. The angel speaks loud enough to wake Peter up. The chains fall down. Peter tightens up his belt. He puts on his sandals. He puts on that outer robe, because this is in the cold part of the year. He walks away from the two guards that are right there next to him. He goes through the first soldier guarded gate. He goes through the second soldier guarded gate. He comes to the iron gate that separates the jailhouse from the city streets. And the gate opens up. As they walk up to it, they don't even touch the gate. It opens right up. They walk through it. They walk about another block, and the angel disappears, and nobody sees or hears nothing. And that verse popped up in my head when I read that. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. That's how God works. It's an amazing thing. Every story in this Bible is true. There was no humanly way possible for Peter to escape that many guards in chains. But when God gets involved, all that stuff goes out the window. All logic goes out the window. That's what we got to remember. Peter comes to his senses and looks around and says, Wow, I'm not dreaming. The Lord has really did this. He really sent the angel, and I'm really out of the jail now. If we want to act right and talk right and live right and trust God, y'all, we might just look around one day and I'll see a miracle happen right before our eyes also. God's not out of the miracle making business. He does things for us. It's a miracle. It's a miracle I'm even saved. It's a miracle any of us are saved, because it's a relationship with somebody we don't even see. Our lives just changed automatically. We look around months later and we realize how it's all changed. That's the miracle. The world had something mean and cruel waiting on Peter that next day, didn't it? But Peter had God in his life. And I'll tell you what, if I didn't have God in my life, I'd be scared to get out of bed tomorrow. I have learned that much so far. If you ain't got God in your life, you might want to make a decision today also. Verses 12 through 17. And when he had considered the thing, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, a damsel came to answer named Rhoda. And when she knew Peter's voice, she opened not the gate for gladness, but ran in and told how Peter stood before the gate. And they said unto her, Thou art mad, but she constantly affirmed that it was even so. Then said they, It is his angel. But Peter continued knocking, and when they had opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. But he, beckoning unto them with the one hand to hold their peace, declared unto them how the Lord had brought him out of prison. And he said, Go and show these things unto James and to the brethren. And he departed and went into another place. This James that Peter's talking about, y'all go tell him and the other brothers, that's a different James from the one that had just gotten killed in verse 2. This James is Jesus' brother that Peter's telling him to go tell. The James that got killed was one of the first original 12 disciples. This girl Rhoda gets so excited that it's Peter outside at that gate that she forgets to unlock the gate and she runs back inside to tell everybody, look, our prayers are being answered right now. Peter's out there at the gate. And so Rhoda keeps telling them, no, it's Peter. He's out there at the gate. And they say, well, it's probably Peter's angel. In the earlier days, I briefly read it, but in the earlier days, there was rumor going around that people would come back as angels and stuff. And I guess they're all upset and everything about James, and they're upset about Peter and worried about him. Maybe they just wasn't thinking clearly. But Peter kept on knocking, so they finally heard him and they went and they let him in. They probably had the gate locked, fearing that being Herod is sure enough showing out for everybody, all the Jews. He may come get some of them too and have them killed out there in the city street. But they probably had that gate locked, and Peter comes in and he motions with his hand for them to quieten down, and he tells them how the Lord sent the angel and delivered him from the prison. And he tells them to send somebody over there to tell James, Jesus' brother, and the other brothers. And then Peter leaves so that if the guards, come looking for him, that, he won't be getting all his other brothers and sisters in trouble. All of them probably go to prison if they, caught them hiding this so-called criminal. Last two verses, verses 18 and 19. Now as soon as it was day, there was no small stir among the soldiers what was become of Peter. And when Herod had sought for him and found him not, he examined the keepers or the guards and commanded that they should be put to death. And he went down from Judea to Caesarea and there abode. So daylight hits, the soldiers are all in an uproar, wondering what in the world's going to happen to Peter. How did he disappear right under all of them's noses? Herod gets ready to get the show on the road. He's wanting to get his ego fixed that day. And he sends for Peter, and he finds out that Peter has escaped. So he calls all them guards in, and he starts interrogating them, questioning them. And they can't tell him that, I don't know if God had him asleep or what. They say, I don't know what happened. He's gone. We looked around, he was gone. That looks like a treason a little bit, so the king's mad at them. And there was a Roman law back then that if a prisoner if you was in charge of a prisoner and he escaped, whatever that prisoner's punishment was, you had to take that punishment. Peter's punishment was death. He questions the guards, he gets mad, and has all 16 of them put to death, probably beheaded. And then he leaves town. And a short time later, King Herod Agrippa I died a horrible death, y'all. It's another story, but it's what happened. An angel of the Lord struck him with a sickness, and that sickness, he was eaten alive from the inside out by worms. And I don't take that as a figuratively speaking story. I take that story literal. In just one day's time, Apostle James was captured and his life was taken. Peter was captured. He was facing death the next day. But with a miracle, he was saved by an angel of the Lord. All the Christians at Mary's house praying, their emotions went from losing a loved brother earlier that day to fearing for the life of another brother, Peter, all the way up to receiving an answered prayer when Peter shows up at the gate. King Herod went from satisfying his own ego with the approval of all the town that day to a very painful death a short time later. And also in that same day, 16 soldiers went from a normal day at work to an interrogation by their king to a death that they really never knew what happened. I know a man that went to work one day. I hoped he showed up to church today, but he didn't. He went to work one day and his whole life got changed instantly. He didn't even know what had happened until it had already started happening. He had 4,000 gallons of diesel fuel in a tanker. One half of the tanker, he had 4,000 gallons of gasoline in the other half of the tanker. He said, "Bo, I reached up to open the door of the truck, and the next thing I saw was that truck flying away from me." And he said, "It didn't take me long to realize that actually it wasn't that truck moving, it was me moving, and that door was still in my hand." And the next thing I know, he said, "I see a lady hitting me and smothering me with a blanket or a coat or something because I was laying there on fire." He described to me what happens to burn victims when they get in the hospital. And with tears in his eyes, he said, "Bo, that nurse," he said, "I called her every name in the book." And he said, "I know we wasn't raised that way, but she was scraping the hide off of me, and I had to say something." I know today that man is my cousin. I know he'll look anybody in the eye, and he can tell them from experience that we are not promised tomorrow. We do not know what will happen to us out here. It's something that we all need to think about. Whenever we think about people that we fear that are not saved, our friends and relatives that we know, we need to get this message to them, that they are not promised tomorrow. Anything can happen at any time. There's a lot of people in this world that's headed for a fire and they just don't know it. And we got to get to them. Some of them have heard about it, but they just don't believe all of it yet. And we got to get to them too. There's a lot of Christians that are in prison, even though they're saved. There's things in their lives that's holding them back, just like chains or prison doors. There's things in their life holding them back. There can be changes in our lives. We got to trust God with it. We got to set our mind to it, and we got to trust God to help us. This morning, if there's anybody that's listening to this on the internet, or anybody that can even hear my voice, if you're not right with God, make sure that you do get right with Him this morning, because we are not promised tomorrow. Nobody is. We're not even promised the rest of this afternoon, actually. For the Christians that's in being held back about some things in their life, we might want to say to the Lord this morning, "Lord, I can't save myself from this no more than Peter could have. He could have saved himself from all them guards. I got to have you to help me with